This episode is brought to you by Walmart. New beauty is in bloom at Walmart, and it's all about springtime radiance. From Drybar, Tula Skincare, and hundreds more available online, Walmart has the premium brands you want and this season's on-trend products for flawless, glossy hair and hydrated skin. Big name beauty brands? Check. The things you love? Check. Find trending spring beauty and all you need to look and feel gorgeous at Walmart, on app and online.
Are your ulcerative colitis symptoms proving difficult to manage? Tremfya guselkumab can help you manage the cycle of UC symptoms. At 1 year, many patients taking Tremfya achieved clinical remission, and some patients also achieved endoscopic remission. Individual results may vary. Tremfya is a prescription medicine used to treat adults with moderately to severely active ulcerative colitis. Serious allergic reactions and increased risk of infections may occur. Before treatment, your doctor should check you for infections and TB. Tell your doctor if you have an infection, flu-like symptoms, or if you need a vaccine. Ask your doctor if Tremfya can help you manage the cycle of UC symptoms. Call 1-800-526-7736 to learn more or visit tremfyaradio.com.
I was never really a runner. The way I see running is a gift, especially when you have stage 4 cancer. I'm Anne. I'm running the Boston Marathon, presented by Bank of America. I run for Dana-Farber Cancer Institute to give people like me a chance to thrive in life, even with cancer.
Join Bank of America in helping Anne's cause. Give if you can at BofA.com/supportAnne. What would you like the power to do? References to charitable organizations is not an endorsement by Bank of America Corporation. Copyright 2025.
Carry on and plan the sequel, because let's face it, baby, these days, you gotta have a sequel.
And welcome back to Micro Queers. It's our sporadic queer horror movie roundup, and I'm Joe.
And I'm Trace, and we are discussing Craig Johnson's comedy horror film, intentionally putting comedy first, The Parenting, which is now streaming exclusively on Max.
Indeed, yeah. And just before we hit record, we were kind of like, why is this on Max? You thought this could perform in theaters. I don't fully agree. I do think that this is a streaming appropriate title, but I do think it's a bit of a weird fit.
Yes. I'm just going to be fully honest. I wasn't expecting a ton from this movie. I didn't know. The trailer I thought was okay, but I thought the humor was kind of like not working fully. But like, whatever. I enjoyed this way more than I thought I was going to, which may be why I'm being a bit more generous with it. But I guess I agree. But hey, so here's one thing, though, because you mentioned offline, too, that this is kind of like the blackening for queer people. And the blackening went to theaters.
It did indeed. Yeah. I mean, it was a fairly limited theater count, but it did end up, doing festival runs, and then it went theatrical, so it did make some money, and now we're getting a sequel, which we're both very excited for. So yeah, maybe we're somewhere in the middle, and maybe that's where Max ended up as well, where they said, we're not sure it has the theatrical capacity, but this is... like, I think you could make money off this.
I think so, too. This movie, and everyone, like, this is very much a comedy that happens to have a demon in it, much like how Hard Eyes was a romantic comedy that happened to have a slasher in it. I found this movie so charming. It's
very fun. Yeah.
It's very giggle-worthy. I could see myself showing this to my family as like a safe family watch,
Agreed. Yeah. Like, folks, we were jostling around. Okay. So yes, you made the example of Hard Eyes in a different capacity. I would say, folks, if you're looking for the vibe of this film and you haven't read the logline, you haven't watched the trailer or whatever, Trace is going to read the description in a moment. But I would say this is somewhere around Slay summoning Sylvia territory.
Yes. Okay. My husband also mentioned Slay, and I was thinking, yes, all of this, like, they would just make really good, because they're very queer horror comedies. And I guess we should point out, I mean, Craig Johnson is not necessarily a name director, but I know he has like a critical darling in The Skeleton Twins, that movie with, I think it's Kristen Wiig and Bill Hader.
It is. Yeah.
And then he also did the Netflix film Alex Strangelove from 2018, which I remember liking, but I don't really remember much of the movie.
Right. right. I watched it last year when Conrad and I were doing our queer movie watch-alongs, and it's entertaining. It's a little bit slight, but it's very cute.
Well, and I think the same could be said about this. I think the parenting is a little bit slight. And I think a lot of that does come from writer Kent Sublette, who I had to look this up because I was like, well, what has he done before? And really, it's just a ton of SNL. And I think that comes through in this screenplay, which...
It's a little sketchy, as in sketch comedy.
Yes, 100%. Which, again, in the moment, I think is fine. May not make for, like, as a whole package, like this, like, great thing. But I don't... Look, the laughs were coming for me.
Yeah. Like, I found this an enjoyable watch. It's about the right length. I maybe would have trimmed it, tried to get a slightly tighter edit. And I don't think all the jokes land, but that's also the purview of a comedy, right? Like, you got to throw everything you've got at the kitchen. Oh my God, at the kitchen sink. Clearly not a comedy writer or anecdotes. You just throw a million miles of joke. No, I still can't do it. Like, oh my God.
I get what you're saying. You're throwing everything at the wall, hoping something sticks. And
thank you.
I think luckily for this movie, I mean, yes, I agree. Not every joke lands, but it's kind of one of those things where it's like, well, if that doesn't land, like there's another joke like seconds away that's about to come your way.
Yes. And the people in it, I think, have the other strong selling features. So people may not know the central queer couple. Hopefully, folks will recognize Brandon Flynn as Josh, because of course we all saw him in the remake of Hellraiser. And then I know I recognize Nick Dodani, but I didn't look him up, so I'm like, I recognize the face, but I couldn't tell you anything he's been in.
Okay, so Nick Dodani, it's interesting because he was in Alex Strangelove, albeit as a smaller role. So I guess he knew the director. But I think the main thing I know him from, so he's definitely in the Dear Evan Hansen movie.
Ooh, God, no, thank you.
He's one of the kids that dies in the first scene of Twisters, I believe.
Okay. He and Kiernan Shipka hanging out, getting sucked up?
Basically, yeah. And then he was a main player, which I did not watch the show, but on Netflix's TV show, Atypical.
Oh, I heard about it, but I didn't watch it.
I think it was controversial because it was the lead character was autistic and the actor wasn't autistic. So the first season got a lot of criticism, but from what I remember, they
course corrected.
Yes. So seasons 2, 3, and 4, big improvements. But
okay, Trace, we've gone too far without actually telling people what is this movie about.
Yes, what this is about. So we have a young gay couple, Rohan, Nick Dodani, and Josh, Brandon Flynn. They're hosting a weekend getaway with their respective parents. So Rohan's parents are Dorothy, played by Edie Falco, and Frank, played by Brian Cox, whereas Josh's parents are John, played by Dean Norris, and Liddy, not Libby, played by Lisa Kudrow, at this like mansion basically that is owned by Brenda, Parker Posey, and then of course their best friend Sarah, Vivian Bang, crashes midway through the movie. Mayhem ensues because there is a cold open in which a whole family is devoured by an unseen demon.
Yeah. So the whole idea is that Ro wants to propose to Josh, which is why they have invited their respective parents. Josh doesn't know about this. Sarah ends up getting roped into this because things go disastrously wrong because it is a meet the parents kind of situation.
Yes.
That's where a lot of the comedy in at least, I want to say the first 45 minutes comes from, is just a comedy of errors where we keep embarrassing ourselves in front of our potential in-laws.
And just heads up, everyone, there are many dogs in this movie. One of them, well, two of them, I think. One of them definitely is murdered. One of them turns into a demon dog and is then murdered again.
Yes, but it does reanimate at the end. Spoilers.
It does reanimate at the end, yes. The CGI eyes on this dog are something.
It's hilarious. It reminded me of Are You Afraid of the Dark?
I think you're thinking Goosebumps with the dog in the opening credits. Yes. No, I thought the exact same thing, which again added to the movie's charm for me. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Like the movie is very silly and self-aware, but also when we do specifically horrific things, like there's a moment where in that cold open, the mom, you know, she's fighting with both of her kids, trying to get them to come down for dinner. The daughter has locked herself in her room, and the mom just goes, I hate these kids. And then she ends up getting sucked out into the garage by unseen demon. But like when she gets sucked out, she thwunks on the floor and gets dragged out. And I was like, that actually looked good. And it hurt. The sound effect was appropriate. The Foley was clicking and clacking and thwunking. So when we actually do the horror stuff, like there's a couple of jump scares that kind of got me.
Yeah, I mean, there is horror, mainly in the profanity department of this movie. But yeah, I mean, I thought it was mostly effective in that part. I mean, I think, though, it's maybe not the best indicator of the film you're about to watch.
Right.
At least in terms of the horror content. But
as you said, it's really first and foremost a comedy film that has a horror premise to it. But like the stakes are pretty low. Like whether or not anybody dies, you're kind of like, well, if they do, I'll just be sad. But it's mostly because I like the actor.
But I will say, though, and I called this pretty early on, and I'm interested to see if you did too. But because basically whenever the sister gets killed, we hear someone on the other side of the door going like, what do you see? What are you seeing? And as soon as we meet Parker Posey, I was like, well, that's her. That's that person behind the door.
Yes, and folks, that is not really a spoiler because it is so obvious, but also the part that Trace is mentioning with the sister, and like that's the family stuff that is the cold open. It's 3 minutes at the beginning of the film. And then every time we see Brenda, she is so obviously kooky and has a relationship with the house. Like, we make a joke about this hair because Trace... this fucking wig on Parker Posey is so goddamn hilarious. But then Josh and Ro go, is that a wig? Is that two wigs? And I swear it changes in every scene that she appears in. Like when we see her at the end, I'm convinced she's wearing a totally different wig.
It is. And so I'll just say this right now. I mean, it was honestly kind of hard for me to pick a favorite character in this movie. So because here's the thing. I think the person who was underserved the most in this film is Ro. Nick Dodani. Yes. Yeah. He doesn't get as much, and this is not to say Dodani's bad in this movie.
He's just the straight man, so he doesn't get as many jokes.
Yes. But Joe, I was very impressed, shockingly so, by Brandon Flynn's comedic timing.
Oh my God. Yeah. So where Ro is getting only a few jokes, Josh is getting 90% of the jokes, especially in the early part of the film, because he's the one who discovers, oh my God, Ro is about to propose to me and he's not supposed to know. So he begins acting very oddly. He takes too many gummies, of course he does, and just embarrasses himself in a bunch of different ways. But between physical pratfalls, vocal inflections, and then his reaction to just about everything, he's really funny.
Like, I have never seen this side of this actor before because, I mean, again, I'm used to, like Hellraiser or, 13 Reasons Why. And those don't give him a chance to be very comedic. And he blew me away in this. Also, like, Brian Cox getting to say some of the shit he does in this movie. But ultimately, I think just for its sheer kookiness, I do love the Parker Posey character, even though she's maybe in the movie the least.
Yeah. I mean, I do feel a little bit bad for Edie Falco because she has to be the sort of shrill mom. And I do think she gets a couple of jokes, but it ends up being this sort of, I don't know, it's the role that has to drive a lot of Josh's reactions. So where Brandon Flynn gets to do a bunch of things, Edie Falco has to be not quite the straight man to his reactions, but she's the impetus for a lot of his comedy. And I felt bad for her because I know she's very multifaceted as an actor. She can kind of do it all. But then as the film progresses, you also get to see what Lisa Kudrow gets to work with as Liddy. And like, especially in the back part of the film, I really felt like Lisa Kudrow just takes off.
She really does. I will say, though, that I think the shared like heart-to-heart moment between Edie Falco and Lisa Kudrow's characters, like before the puppet dog starts attacking them, I thought that was actually really nice. So Edie Falco, I think, she gets the better, like, quiet, like heartfelt moments, but less of the comedy for sure.
Indeed. Yeah. But I agree with you, Brian Cox. I mean, we know Brian Cox as a bit of a stately, very serious actor. You know, like most people, especially if you're just new to his acting, like you probably just saw him on Succession. And he's such an oligarch in that show. And you tend to think of him as very reserved, like, oh, he's X2, he's serious, he's stately, and so on. And here, spoiler, folks, he gets possessed by this demon. And so he's just spouting all of these homophobic, like anti-queer things, but they're also kind of hilarious, where you're just like, oh, we're talking about small dicks and big butts.
Oh my God. Like, wait, okay. He is like yelling to Brandon Flynn across the door, like, is his dick too small? Too small for your butt? It's It's Brian Cox. I mean, granted, he has like a demon voice, so it may not actually, he may just be like mouthing all of this while a voice actor comes in and does it. But
it's him, and then they like auto-tuned him with demon voice inflection.
It is so
very funny.
This was a movie where it was really hard for me to take notes because I kept wanting to just write down dialogue. But
yes,
at the same time, though, I mean, look, there are so many jokes in this movie, but I think ultimately, right, and I'll pinpoint a couple of jokes that we like, but I think ultimately it's just the chemistry with this cast. Like there are so many not even dialogue driven moments that the cast has together that work, that is funny. And I don't know, man, like just the whole vibe of this movie, I was just like, yep, I'm into this. I'm very into this.
Yeah, it's a very simplistic, very relatable setup. And you've got a bunch of people who just are funny, and you put them into a situation where they can riff off of each other. Like, I would be interested to know how much of this is improv versus scripted jokes, but it does seem very obvious, much in the same way that we talked about Slay, and I would say Summoning Sylvia, which we never ended up covering. Yeah. But like, it's fun to watch the film because it seems obvious that the people making the film were having a really good time.
100%. So, okay, Joe, then do you have a favorite, like a sequence that stands out for you in this film?
Okay, so I did like this moment where everybody has arrived. We've had a lot of awkward interactions, and now it's time for bed. So we retire to our respective bedrooms, and then we hear this thudding sound. And we see, the audience sees, that it is actually like the dead ghost of Allie banging her head against the wall. Mm-hmm. But all the individual couples think that it's one of the other couples having loud, performative, very long sex. And then we're gossiping about it. Like, I think at one point, Edie Falco says, "Oh my God, she's going to be sore in the morning," because she thinks it's Liddy getting railed by Dean Norris.
I'm sorry. I actually really did enjoy all the Liddy Libby stuff, but it got old after a while. But whenever she's like, "Oh, like the can of vegetables," and she's like, "That's Libby's." Oh.
It's just very stupid, but very funny.
I think and again, there are a lot of gags throughout this movie, but I think no bigger guffaw came out of my mouth than when we start doing the flashbacks to the 80s later in the film, and we see Parker Posey's character not played by a younger actress, but by Parker Posey in braces. And
oh my God. It's just adult Parker Posey trying to pretend like she's a teenager, and no one is buying it, and that is kind of the joke.
It's so, and then we also do that because we've talked about this before too, where we're doing a flashback and someone is like, who's telling the flashback is saying the dialogue, but then like it's their audio, like lip-syncing.
I do love it.
It's so funny. And so yeah, I mean, again, there was a treasure trove of things to pick from, but Parker Posey wearing braces, and like we're just buying into, well, we're not buying into the idea that she's a teenager. It's really funny.
So stupid.
And so you said, Andres' homophobia when he's in Brian Cox, which again, I think Brian Cox gets to do just so many things you wouldn't expect Brian Cox to do in this movie.
Yes.
I do want to single out Dean Norris because we haven't really mentioned him yet. I know we know him from Breaking Bad, but again, I didn't really know him for his comedic presence. But when he is beating the fuck out of the possessed dog with the meat mallet, and he's like, "Do not fuck with my wife," and then like it's not dead, and he just goes really fast, "Do not fuck with my wife."
Yeah, and he's whacking it faster with this little mallet. And folks, if you're worried about it, like this is very clearly a puppet dog, but also we cover it with a dishcloth for the most part when he's doing this.
Oh, I'm really glad we don't get to see the smush dog that gets crushed by the cabinet.
Oh my God, that was the funniest thing to me. I mean, not that I want to see dogs get injured, but this is just so comedically like tiny little dog, giant china cabinet, and you just, of course, get the point of view from the dog as this thing is.
Yeah. And I also want to say, because I feel robbed. There's actually, I think, a pretty funny joke that Lisa Kudrow gets to say where she's like, "Oh, I was walking by Brian Cox's bedroom and he just called me a word that I don't want to say, but he said it so long." So she goes on this, I want to say 45-second thing of just saying the word.
So long.
She's saying cunt, but she's just going cuh. I feel a little robbed that we don't get to hear Brian Cox doing this.
Oh, no. See, I don't know that it would be as funny unless we cut back and forth between her recreating it and him doing it and her having to listen or be drawn in on the other side of the store.
Yeah, almost if we had to hear the ka like 3 times in the film.
Yes, yeah. And you keep waiting for it to end, but then we edit and edit and edit.
Yes!
Yeah, that could have been funny.
And, it all comes together in the end. I actually, maybe a little too pat, but I kind of like how it's like, oh, everyone has to work together to confuse the fuck out of this demon.
I really like how this comes together as well, because as I said earlier, I was trying to figure out if we were going to introduce stakes by actually killing any of these characters. And I'm not going to lie, I maybe think we could have killed Sarah. I don't fully think we needed this character in here, although I do appreciate her emotional moment with Rowan later in the film about how she's worried she's going to get left out when they get married and move away and so on.
I mean, I don't think the film needs her, but I do think all of her jokes, most of her jokes landed for me.
Yeah, I mean, I like Vivian Bang as a performer in the same way I ended up saying, oh, everyone in this movie is doing exactly what they need to do because they're all on the right wavelength. But yeah, I mean, by the time we get to the ending and we realize, okay, it's about how they need to come together to work together. And so much of the film has been them at odds with one another, not trusting each other. I did find that also got a little bit tedious around the second act where I just wanted people to actually start making those connections and working together a little bit earlier. So for me, the film drags a touch in the second act. But yeah, I mean, when it all comes together and the way it comes together, I thought was pretty clever and kind of satisfying.
Yeah, I agree. I couldn't quite figure out, because during the ceremony, Parker Posey is like, no, you're killing him. Like, don't do this. But then at the end, she's like, hey, I'm free from the demon's grasp. That's great. And I couldn't figure out fully what she actually wanted.
Yeah, it was inconsistent. I would have liked her to have been in some kind of trance, like she wasn't fully in control of herself. And then she realized it when she got free. Oh, I don't have to listen to him anymore. But her drawing that circle around the house is real funny. So stupid with this giant stick. Oh, yeah, we're just setting up the outdoor sprinkler system in the country.
Yeah, she's like, I'm measuring. Yep, that's 600 units.
Just a lot of very dumb jokes.
This to me is like a lock-in for best ensemble for the Hereditaries at the end of the year.
Oh, I do like that. Yeah. Yeah, I will say one other complaint. It's a minor complaint, but as a queer audience member in this very obviously queer-oriented film, we're making tons of comments about Brandon Flynn's body, which I have seen pictures of, and I definitely don't have any pictures saved in my photo roll. None at all. Definitely not his Calvin Klein photo shoot. We never see the body trace. And I was disappointed by that. I was like, we're not even going to get a scene of him like changing his shirt for breakfast or dinner or something. Come on. I'm just saying, we now have 2 explicit texts that address Brandon Flynn as a queer person because, of course, he is out in real life. And we haven't gotten a sex scene with him, and he hasn't taken his top off in either film.
I think that is a fair complaint. I actually was hoping for a sex scene in this movie, but then when I realized, oh no, there's no sex in this movie, then...
No, it's very chaste. It's very like, look at this queer, unoffensive couple.
But I think it also helps, that we have a queer director working on this film.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. But I mean, ultimately, I had a lot of fun with this. It is a little slight, but I would still love the chance to see this in a crowded theater with a bunch of people.
Yeah, I think the best case scenario is get a gaggle of queers over, pop some bottles, maybe have your own mango gummy collection ready to go, and just have a good time. Like, we're never going to see this in the theater, so the best we can do is, you know what, double bill this with Slay. We'll have a good evening.
Honestly, yes, double bill this with Slay, throw in some Summoning Sylvia. You have a perfect gay comedy horror movie night right there.
There we go.
Yep. All right, everyone. Well, until next time, we can cross out the parenting.
Indeed. And cross out microqueers.